I called Jamie Lee Ross.
Move that the question be
I'm going to have Poto Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to get back to the heart of this bill, which is vulnerability. And I recall when the work was first commenced, that there was a lot of discussion in the community about the definition of vulnerability, what it actually meant, because some of the paperwork that came out from the Minister and the Ministry at the time talked about every child thriving, surviving. It talked about a broad-based approach to supporting our children through the most difficult times in their life. And as community groups and social sector providers, we struggled with what was vulnerability. And I can recall questions going back to Child, Youth and Family to ask, what is the definition of vulnerability? In those very first pieces of work, there was no definition of vulnerability. And you can understand why, because you can be vulnerable based on your life circumstances, or you can be vulnerable based on simply how old you are. You can be vulnerable at 5 and then at 6 no longer be vulnerable, depending on whether you're able to go to school, the income of your family. There are many, many different definitions of vulnerability, and that was one of the difficult things about this bill, is that there is no definition of what a vulnerable child actually is. We are left to make the assumption that vulnerability is about children who we're presuming who are from low-income families, from families where alcohol and drugs perhaps is an issue. But there is no clear definition of vulnerability, and that's where this bill comes unstuck from the very beginning. But I want to go back to Paul Nixon, who's the Chief Social Worker, and what he says in lots of his public addresses about vulnerability. What he claims is the unholy trinity of vulnerability for children. And he quotes that as being when your parents are mentally unwell, when there's problematic substance abuse, and when there is family violence. Now, that is the definition that Child, Youth and Family use for vulnerability, and one would think that that would be the automatic threshold with which children enter the Child, Youth and Family system. Well, I can tell you categorically it is not. And that's where I have a real difficulty, because having sat on a community panel supporting Child, Youth and Family social workers who were dealing with children who had some difficulties in their lives, those were all flags for us as community people in terms of SIFs intervening. But Child, Youth and Family are, despite the fact that they are a relatively large organisation, we are talking about huge numbers of children who experience difficulties when their parents have got mental illness, problematic substance abuse and family violence. We know about the overwhelming statistics of family violence. They've been highlighted to us this week by the People's Report from the Glen Inquiry. And yet family violence is not a mechanism that would trip these children going into an investigation from Child, Youth and Family. So we might be talking about the Vulnerable Children's Bill, but it is definitely a misnomer, because it does not pick up our most vulnerable children. In fact, it seems to carve a section of those children and define them as vulnerable, and leave all these other children whom we are equally as vulnerable out in the cold. Part of this bill looks at how to keep kids safe through professionals being screened as being safe to work with children. Now, when we've heard many of the folk who have spoken on this bill before say there's an inherent flaw in this, and that it's not just people who are paid to work for children that should be screened. There is a whole group of people for whom issues have occurred where children have been abused in their care, who aren't paid professionals. And here we talk about sports clubs, coaches, people who are engaged in recreational activities with children. So where we may be looking at keeping children safe in a professional sense.
Claudette Howiti.
The question being now put.
The question is that the question be now put. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. A party vote's called for. I'll ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 in favour.
Mana.
1 vote opposed.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan. Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 62, the noes are 56. The question will be put. We come to the vote on clauses 1 and 2. The question is that clause 1 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. A party vote's called for. Ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 in favour.
Māori
2
Party.
in favour.
Mana.
1 vote opposed.
United
1
Future.
in favour.
Brendan Horan. Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 103, the noes are 15. Clause 1 will stand part. We now come to clause 2, but first we have the Minister's amendment as set out on SOP number 435. The question is that the amendment be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Question then is clause 2 is amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party votes called for. Ask the clerk to conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes in favour.
Māori Party.
2 in favour.
Mana.
1 vote opposed.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan. Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 103, the noes are 15. Clause 2 is amended will stand part.
Mr Chairman.
The Honourable Peter-Sam Lotu-Iiga.
Mr Chair, I move supplementary order paper number 434 dividing the bill.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. I will report this bill with amendment and so divided. Presently. Shortly. Members, the Housing Committee on the Companies and Limited Partnerships Amendment Bill. We move to debate on